You're listening to the new media. You're listening to Mitchell Talks. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter at Mitchell Talks.
It's the All of the Above Energy Podcast. I'm Scott Mitchell. This week, my guest is Mark Yates, Vice President of Advanced Power Alliance. He's discussing wind, solar, and the future of renewable energy in Oklahoma and the region. In this two-part series, Mr. Yates talks about the so-called war on wind. Is it over? And if so, who gets the credit? Also in this episode, how much did those battles harm Oklahoma's business reputation, and how does it feel to have commerce officials from the business world instead of politicians running the Commerce Department? My first question to Mr. Yates, is the war on wind over?
I'd sure like to think so. I think in Oklahoma we've turned the corner. You know, I think over the last 4 to 5 years, we've obviously seen some resistance, to the growth of renewable energy in Oklahoma. I think we've seen energy sources pitted against each other. And I think that, really two sessions ago, we kind of learned that no one won in that scenario. When you have energy resources, fighting each other back and forth, at the end of the day, I think we all came away with the fact that wasn't good for oil and gas, it wasn't good for renewables, and ultimately it was not good for the state of Oklahoma and our business reputation. And so I'm positive in the sense that, this year, example, we've got new Governor Stitt, we've got Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell, leadership in both the House and the Senate, a lot of new faces at the Oklahoma legislature, and I think they've all been very focused on Oklahoma's reputation and how we are viewed by others across the nation. Are we a business-friendly state? And I think Governor Stitt has made it very clear that he wants people to view Oklahoma as, look, we're a great place to do business. We want your investment. We want to be partners with you. And so I think there's just a new era in Oklahoma right now. I think the message that we are projecting from the legislature is one that is very positive. And, so I'm hopeful that the quote-unquote war on renewables, energy wars, whatever you want to call it, I hope that we've turned the curve and that all energy can thrive and prosper because that's what we need for the state of Oklahoma moving forward. We have to have a strong energy economy to continue to drive a strong state economy. The governor of the state sets the tone. And so I do give Governor Stitt a lot of credit for casting a vision of collaboration, of everyone working together. I think over the past couple of years, before this session, obviously with budget downturn and deficits, some of the fights between, it really wasn't just Republicans versus Democrats, it was House versus Senate. And it became very visceral. So I think, yes, you do have to give him a lot of credit for changing the tone and the rhetoric and the atmosphere of working together at the state capitol. I think it has helped dramatically. To your earlier point, yes, we have seen well-funded, highly organized opposition to renewable energy and the growth thereof. But I don't think that's necessarily just unique to energy. At the end of the day, anytime there's a disruption in the market, it comes with resistance. I tell people all the time, think about taxi. Taxi, it's what everybody used, and taxi's what everybody, got around in cities when they went to visit, and then all of a sudden we had this thing called Uber. It's a market disruption. It changed everything. And there's always pushback, and there's always challenges when you have market disruption. But I think in Oklahoma, what's really, a positive where we are positioned with our natural resource base is that, look, we've been richly blessed with oil production. We have an abundance of natural gas, affordable natural gas, and we have an infinite supply of affordable wind power. And in the very near future, we're going to have an infinite supply of solar power as well to pair with the wind resource. And so for Oklahoma, we're uniquely positioned in the Southwest Power Pool, and from a market standpoint, that combination of natural gas and renewables sets us apart in the region. And so, again, yes, there has been resistance to change. How do you overcome that? Part of it is leadership, with Governor Stitt, leadership at the Capitol. But I also think, too, it's just time, right? It's education. It takes a while for the general public to be informed about how does this market disruption, how does this change actually impact us as just the average everyday Oklahoman. And so, we've been very, laser focused on trying to get that message out and informing the public of here's what the benefits of, wind power is, the benefits of renewables as we move forward for the state of Oklahoma. Well, there's no doubt it's difficult to overcome, when you've had 3 or 4 years of just a combative climate from the state of Oklahoma. Companies across the nation, corporate offtake across the nation, and that's one thing as we try to educate folks at the Capitol. This isn't about a quote-unquote wind company. All of our members that have invested in renewables are major energy companies. They're highly diversified. They've got assets in numerous states across the country, some across the world, and they also deal with some of the largest, financial institutions in the world and corporate off-takers. They're selling power to folks like Anheuser-Busch, like Google, like Amazon, like AT&T, T-Mobile, Kimberly-Clark. And so, word gets out of, wait a second, what is Oklahoma doing? And so, to have the year we have had this year with the new leadership in place, I think it's a breath of fresh air. But I still think it's a constant effort to educate companies that, listen, it's a new day in Oklahoma. It is not as we have seen it the past 3 to 4 years. It is a changed environment. It is, a leadership in the legislature and at the governor's office that is definitely pro-business, pro-growth, pro-economic development, pro-jobs. And they want to project that message to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And so, I think we can overcome it. I think this session has been very helpful. This year has been very helpful. And again, I think it's time, but at the end of the day, I think, yes, we will overcome it and continue to invest and grow. And Oklahoma's a great place to do that. It's all about speaking the common language, right? And if you have that business background, you've ran a business, you're running a business, when you can speak that language, it just makes it that much easier to speak to companies and to recruit companies because you're talking the same language, and so I think, compared to just, hiring somebody that's in politics to go out and recruit these companies, I think it's a completely different angle to have someone from business and that can speak their language when they're recruiting a company to the state of Oklahoma. So I think it's been great to see what the administration has done and build out the cabinet to put folks from industry, from businesses, into these positions to where they can talk. It's peer-to-peer, right? Recruiting to the state of Oklahoma. I think from a renewable standpoint, now there has to be some focus on ancillary pieces to this industry. It's not just about, hey, we want you to come build a wind farm or we want you to build a solar farm. How do you get into drawing a blade manufacturer or, manufacturer of, solar components or smaller components of the gearboxes, the turbines, the towers themselves, transmission infrastructure components? How do we bring those pieces to the state of Oklahoma to add even more value above and beyond just building wind farms and solar farms and or battery technology? Okay, that's a very good question. I think when you come to electricity, power generation, one thing to keep in mind when we compare ourselves to a state like Texas, Texas has its own electricity market in ERCOT, which makes them very competitive in a lot of ways because they're a very unique and isolated market. They're not dependent upon other states, right? Whereas in Oklahoma, we're a part of a 14-state grid. From the Red River to the Canadian border, we're connected with all of these states. And when you start getting in line, so to speak, to invest, you've got companies investing in Oklahoma, in Kansas, in Nebraska, and Missouri, and Iowa, and the Dakotas. And, there's honestly a backlog of projects being, kind of in the queue. And we're so far behind just because there's such a desire to invest in the region from the Red River to Canada. There's so many projects in the pipeline, it just takes longer to get those projects to come online. So I don't think it's, the business reputation so much right now of Oklahoma as much as we're in a different market than what Texas is. And there's a lot more variables and there's a lot of competition in those 14 states to kind of get in line and wait your turn before you can get your project to come to fruition. So, ultimately, I still think, Oklahoma is the prime spot in that market in SPP for not only wind, but solar. And battery storage technology is coming, and I think we will see battery storage in the coming years for sure. Well, I don't think it takes long to look at trends across the country and see where the electricity markets are headed. When it comes to power generation, when it comes to creating electricity, I think there's a couple of trends. One, coal is going to continue to phase out. It's too expensive. Consumers across the country, corporate buyers across the country want clean, affordable energy. So I think you're going to continue to see coal phasing out. You're going to continue to see growth in renewables. I think wind and solar are going to have a lot of competition, frankly. The price of solar has come down to the extent, and it's peak energy, right? When you're talking about solar, it's prime time when the sun is burning in the hot summer days from 2 to 5. That's when that peak demand hits, and solar is able to come online during peak hours. And so that paired with, natural gas is obviously going to continue to be a player, I think, for the coming decade or two. And so you're going to have this unique combination of cheap natural gas and cheap renewables. And, you already see that taking place in a state like Oklahoma, where in 2018 your generation mix was 42% natural gas for electricity, 36% was wind, and the rest of that small pie was coal and hydro. And so I think you're going to continue to see that to the extent of, I could see in Oklahoma in the next 5 years or so that we're knocking on the door at 50% renewable as far as electrical generation. So it's going to be that blend, that combination of natural gas and renewables. And then once battery storage technology gets to the point it needs to be, that's when you could really see wind, solar take a lion's share of that market in the electricity market. But I think for the next couple of decades, it's going to be that nice blend of natural gas and renewables. Energy is always changing, and for us to ever think that energy is going to stop changing and evolving, it's kind of a foolish thought. We at one point in history we burned wood for energy, right? So we've always evolved and moved, and so a company today, many of the companies and the members within our association, they are utilities. They've got, some have nuclear, some have coal, they've got natural gas, they've got oil production, they've got renewable portfolios. And so I think today you have to be very nimble, and I think you see companies grappling with the fact that the market is rapidly changing. There's these disruptions in the market that are forcing companies to phase out some of the older energy assets they may have, such as coal, and look for ways to invest in more cost-affordable energy sources, such as wind and solar. For the first time in the history, we see from a utility scale standpoint that solar and wind are now cheaper than even building a natural gas plant. And so I think the business model, even for companies today, is evolving and changing because they are having to adapt to disruptions in the market, and everything is happening at such a faster pace now because of technology. And so I think, today a modern energy company, they probably have an oil and gas portfolio. They've got a renewable portfolio. They may even have some older assets. But yet you also have that mid-range, right, where we're just a wind development company, or we're just a solar developer, or we're just developing natural gas. And those companies all have a place and a role. But for the foreseeable decades, you're probably going to want to be, if you're going to be in that market, you're probably going to want to develop, its natural gas and its renewables moving forward, for especially these, utilities are especially scrambling to meet the needs of an ever-changing market.
In our next episode, Mark Yates discusses the future of solar in Oklahoma, the overheated hype about wind turbines and military bases, and the forgotten victims of the wind wars, the private property owners. See you next time on the All of the Above Energy Podcast. I'm Scott Mitchell.
You're listening to the new media, the Mitchell Talks Network. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter @MitchellTalks.